Welcome to yet another fresh episode of Dynamic CISO Talk Show. That's where we get into conversations with industry leaders, stalwarts of industry, technology experts, and visionaries on a range of issues, including industry trends, product innovations, and also future outlook. In this episode, I have today the good fortune of having with me Jesper Andersen, who's the president and CEO of InfoBlox. He's with us today live. Jesper took over the reins in 2014. He has spent a long duration in the organization. Before joining InfoBlox, he served in a number of organizations in senior leadership roles, which includes Cisco, which includes other organizations like Oracle, PeopleSoft, Pivotal Software, and Computer Resources International. InfoBlox, which was founded in 1999, is a pioneering technology organization that provides simplified solutions of complex distributed networking and security by its cloud-first approach to automate and streamline network operations, security operations, and DevOps as well. Now, these are the three key pillars which are used to enable the modern day digital transformation. Welcome to the talk show, Jesper. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Rahul, and I appreciate you having me here. It's great to be here live. I'm thankful I'm not home in California, in which case it would be 4 o'clock in the morning doing this live. So,
absolutely, blessing that you are in Bangalore today. Yeah. So during this 30-odd minute conversation, I would expect some really insightful and useful information coming from you across different domains. But to kickstart, to begin with, how has your journey been so far as the CEO and president of InfoBlox? Since 2014, it's been a fairly long time, and last couple of years have been very extraordinarily disruptive.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that the average tenure of a CEO is just under 5 years. So I guess I should feel privileged having been here 7.5 years now. So look, I'm a software developer by trade. So that was how I started my career. And I'm very much a technologist at heart. And like you said, I had some good fortune at working in some great companies over the years. And I really spent the first half of my career in business applications before I then joined Cisco and learned more about networking and so on. And I think sort of to preface how I think about the journey, maybe it's worth just spending a second on why I joined InfoBlox and what I saw in InfoBlox and kind of how I perceived that. Because you could probably, and your readers can probably appreciate that when you're a software person and you join Cisco, at a point in time when this big phenomenon called cloud was starting to really take shape, right? Then that sort of has an impact on how you think about things. It's a fact that in the early days of cloud, via the AWSs of the world, it became super easy to rent compute nodes and rent allocated storage to those compute nodes. And I'm old enough as an application developer to remember when we had to go buy big hardware, big storage appliances, and it could take months to get that ready. And now all of a sudden, you could just buy as many compute nodes as you want, as you needed them on the fly. And my view as a software person was that's inevitably going to happen to networking too. There's no technical reason why it shouldn't happen. Now, you could probably also appreciate, as great as company as Cisco is, that change and that transformation and transition is very difficult for a company like Cisco, who is the clear market leader in networking, and it has proven very difficult for Cisco. I viewed that as inevitable. And so my view was, I better find a place where we can be part of that transformation. And I felt like I found a great company in InfoBlox. InfoBlox at the time was a traditional networking appliance type of company, but with a great product and with an established market leadership in this category called DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. And in my mind, when you are responsible for managing IP addresses on some of the largest networks in the world with some of the largest companies in the world, that's probably a good bet, because there aren't going to be fewer IP addresses, and there are not going to be fewer DNS records and queries. So I thought it was a great company with a great leadership position, and it was a company that was committed to going on this cloud journey. My vision was always that I wanted us to continue to be the DDI leader, but I needed us to be able to deliver that DDI service in a hybrid manner where the customer decides, do I want physical appliances? Do I want virtual appliances? Do I want to deploy those virtual appliances in a public cloud? Or do I just want to consume the whole thing as a service? And InfoBlox today, 7.5 years later, is the only company that can give our customers that choice with our traditional NIOS solution, appliances, physical or virtual, extended into all the public cloud that matter, and increasingly via our Blox One DDI solution, which is, our DDI as a service solution. The journey is not done. We'll talk more about cybersecurity, but that was why I joined, and I'm proud of how we have grown the company in the process of that transformation.
No, so very, very, very unique answer to the question that you have given, and initially you clarified that you have been a software guy. So this logic of transitioning from Cisco to InfoBlox is a very convincing logic, because you were very convinced that NetOps is an inevitable thing to disrupt and change, and you need to be in the right place to enable that disruption. So great, Jesper. So if I transition from the initial conversation with you, I was just recently reading the CRN's top 20 coolest networking security organizations, and I found InfoBlox right up there. How does the company outshine its competitors in this space? And you just mentioned that you are one of the unique companies. How does the company outshines the competition in this space, especially when it comes to integrating DNS, DHCP, and IP address management into a unified service?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there are many, I'd say, dimensions to that question. Right? I think innovation is key in general, regardless of what company you are, what sort of sector you are in. We focus intensely on innovation. And I think as technology changes incredibly quickly, innovation best be done when it's done with customers. Customers have the interesting use cases, they have the challenges, and we focus a lot on innovating with our customers. That's one part of the answer. Two, obviously, size matters. We are the largest company in this DDI space. We have about just over 50% market share. And it means that we have a scale where we can afford to invest in these solutions that perhaps our competitors can't. We have more engineers and developers at InfoBlox than all of our smaller competitors combined. And that does buy you some advantages. You just can't be arrogant about it, and you can't rest on those laurels. The third part of this dimension is really around the people of an organization. It's about the culture of a company. And we have been very fortunate that we have some great employees at InfoBlox. We invest in our employees. We invest a lot in training. We give people room to grow. And this has actually been super important through the pandemic, right? We spent a lot of time with our employees. If you think back to the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of anxiety. What's happening in the world? People had families. How do we work? We gave our employees a lot of flexibility. A lot of companies kind of pay hearsay to culture and to the employees. But the fact of the matter is all of your employees in IT have choices and options today. And actually in a post-pandemic world, they have less of a connection to a company because many people started new jobs during the pandemic. By the way, I read a very interesting article yesterday, just sort of for reference here. It was a big survey of people that had changed jobs during the pandemic. 70% of the people that had changed jobs had buyer's remorse. They had some regret that they had left the company. So I'm fascinated and paranoid and focused on what the world looks like after this pandemic. And I'm very thankful for the employees we have. And I'd say that's another reason sort of why we've been able to continue to innovate and maybe grow a little bit faster and better than our competitors in this area.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, a little digression from our conversation, which needs to be focused more on technology.
Yes.
Since you touched the aspect of culture, if I'm not wrong, there are around 1,000 odd employees that InfoBlox has today. Is it?
We are actually approaching 1,800 employees.
1,800. Okay.
We were 700 people when I joined. Actually, when we started our operation here in Bangalore, where I am today, we started that in 2016. And as I was here today, I'm told we have 453 people here in Bangalore. And I told the team here today, I see nothing but growth here. And I hope that, in another 4 to 5 years, I would hope that we'd be double that number at least.
So what's the composition of these 1,800 people? And you just told that there are 400 in Bangalore. They are mostly from the development side, if I'm not wrong. Innovation.
Actually, we have a great cross-functional team here. We have a big finance team here. We have a big IT team here. We were one of the first companies, certainly amongst all the companies that I know of, to deploy our entire procurement team here in Bangalore as well. So we've been pretty aggressively moving after all the different talented people that are here in India and in Bangalore. So I'd say pretty cross-functional in many ways. And of course, we have to have HR to support our employees and facilities and all of that. So pretty cross-functional.
Just in the lighter vein, were you also impacted by the Great Resignation? This whole momentum.
I don't think anyone in IT can say that they weren't impacted by some level of that. We have certainly seen higher attrition through this last year. To some extent, it feels like the world woke up and decided, hey, I don't like my life. I need a change, different job, whatever else it is. So I certainly can't say that we haven't been impacted. We've been able to hire really good people, but yeah, we also lost a few people that I wish we hadn't lost.
So that was a little digression, sorry for that, but I was a little curious to know about certain other things. So getting back to our core discussion, DNS security being very, very critical for organizations to keep up with the evolving threat landscape and as a foundational layer in their defense in-depth strategy. Gartner also says that DNS presents excellent opportunities to anticipate, prevent, detect, and respond to the threats. So what role, according to you, does DNS management and security play in driving a successful hybrid working environment for organizations, which they are bracing in large numbers?
Yeah, great question. And the most fundamental use case of what role DNS plays that I can sort of give your viewers is when bad stuff gets on your network. And today, unfortunately and sadly, it is the question of when it gets on your network, because cyber terrorists and cyber criminals are very well funded, as you know, and with a more dynamic and opening up network, it's harder and harder to defend. And that means, it's hard to detect all phishing emails, as an example, and inevitably, most compromises and incidents happens when one of our employees does something wrong. They click on something they shouldn't click on or something like that. Now, when that stuff gets on your network, malware, ransomware, whatever it might be, the very first thing it tries to do is to connect to what we all know as a C2, right? A command and control center. Yep. In almost every case, that happens very first time with a DNS query, because it needs to look up the address to whatever web server is hosting that kind of domain, that kind of command and control center. And that means that the DNS server is the first point of entry in the kill chain, right? And so if we can, as organizations, prevent that DNS query from being resolved, if that workload, that sort of requester, if you like, if that requester never gets an IP address back, DNS is the phone book of the internet, as I'm sure your users know. then we will have prevented that malware from being successful. And that's the role we play. We helped invent this notion of the DNS firewall. We added this thing called RPZ to the standard of DNS so that we now can filter on DNS queries. And today we deliver that DNS firewall on-prem and we deliver that in the cloud. So any dynamic CISO, I've been waiting to say that, by the way, because of the name of your publication, but any dynamic CISO would want to make sure they have defense in depth as a strategy and that they have defense around DNS. And many vendors offer, especially the firewall vendors, offer some kind of rudimentary DNS defense, but it's unfortunately not strong enough with the sophistication of cyber criminals that we see today. Not only do they use DNS for normal domain name resolutions, they also are very sophisticated and use it for DNS tunneling and for DNS-based data exfiltration. And if you don't want those things to happen on your network, you need a DNS security solution built by experts. And there aren't very many of those. I wouldn't say we're the only one, but that is what we specialize in doing.
So, if I may ask a little bit more digression, and which is, a supplementary question to this. Would you like to also tell that about some of these suspicious DNS queries, and what could that be?
I will give you a good example, and unfortunately, it's a sad example, right? I mean, we are all devastated by the war in Ukraine, and it is terrible to watch that on the news every day. What is powerful is to see how at least a big part of the world is bonding together to help the poor Ukrainian people via various humanitarian efforts, whether that's taking refugees and housing them in primarily Western Europe right now, or the rest of the world providing funding and donation for humanitarian efforts. That's heartwarming and that's necessary for the Ukrainian people. What is not heartwarming is when cyber criminals are going in as posing themselves as as gatekeepers for that humanitarian effort. There are actually cyber criminals that are setting up websites for humanitarian efforts when good-meaning people go and donating people with the intent of helping the Ukrainian people. Cyber criminals are stealing that money. InfoBlox helped discover some of the cybersecurity threats around that were connected to the war in Ukraine. There have been a number of security incidents and threats. One is known as Tesla, and there's a few others that we have helped discover very quickly. To help prevent this terrible, terrible behavior of these people, InfoBlox made the decision to basically open source our threat intelligence. We have a large threat intelligence team. All of our threat intelligence that's connected to this aspect around the war in Ukraine is available for people that can go onto GitHub and look at that threat intelligence. And we are very happy to share that with the rest of the world to use to provide more focus on that. And we certainly call on other cybersecurity companies to do the same so that we can help prevent this kind of unspeakable behavior.
I was reading about it. I mean, it was as recent as less than a week ago.
It was last week actually. And if your users want to read about it, just go to infoblox.com and click on our blogs, and you can kind of read about it there.
I did that. I read that on the blog itself. So very interesting point that you mentioned, Jesper, about how the CISOs and InfoSec professionals should look at addressing this whole concept of cyberkill chain, and how important, therefore, it is to operationalize the whole threat intelligence for a very dynamic defense in their favor. So, would you like to give some kind of recipe, some kind of prescription to the CISOs, how they should approach this?
I think, most strong CISOs today in let's say, medium or large size enterprises. It obviously varies a little bit, but they very much approach this, as I said, from a defense in depth strategy, right? The old days of just trying to keep the bad guys out doesn't work in this world where we are not no longer in offices all the time, and where working from remote used to be done by a VPN. Nobody really does that anymore. And that means we have to have a different architecture for security as well. Sometimes that's referred to as a zero trust architecture or zero trust network architecture. It is a collection of tools that's based on identity of the user and grants access to whatever a user in a certain role is supposed to have access to. And then it's that trusted relationship that basically is the foundation for all the policies that govern how traffic is, sort of steered and routed around a network. Most big enterprises is on some journey from a traditional architecture towards that zero trust type of paradigm or architecture today. The role InfoBlox helps these CISOs with is twofold. One is, as I mentioned, we are a leading vendor in securing DNS. And that is a tool that can help prevent some of that bad behavior that we talked about. But the other and very important role that we play for our customers is when you are the world's leader in managing DNS and IP addresses, then you sit on a treasure trove of information that is very, very important to the cybersecurity operations team, the SOC, as I'm sure your users and your readers know it as. The fact of the matter is that a modern day dynamic CISO has too many tools that are not integrated very well, and also has a huge challenge with overflow of information. I speak to CISOs all the time. Some of them tell me it's not uncommon for them to have 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 alerts and issues on a daily basis. And they have a relatively small SOC team, which, by the way, is one of the hardest teams to staff today, because there's massive burnout in SOC teams because it's a thankless job, totally under pressure all the time. That SOC team relies on security analytics systems, sometimes known as SIEM systems, SIEM systems. In the most rudimentary way, these SIEM systems gets populated by raw log files that are just loaded up from your routers, your switches, your DDI solutions, your proxy servers, your firewalls. But figuring out what happened on the network in an incident is like looking for a needle in a haystack. What we can do is help these poor people in the SOC with better correlated information. We handed out the IP address. We know what MAC address was connected to that IP address. By the way, that same MAC address, which uniquely defines your computer, changed IP addresses throughout a number of hours as you moved from one location to another. But it was the same MAC address that was the computer that sent these queries to bad domain names. It was just from different IP addresses. How are you going to know that unless you have someone like InfoBlox help correlate that information? And we should, because we manage that information. So we call that our security ecosystem. We have done a lot of integration with other security tools. We think of it as, how can we make your other security tools better? By creating better integrations. We integrate with the leading SOAR platforms, which, as you know, is an orchestration layer, so that you can grab our information from APIs with ease and populate your other systems. We pre-integrate with existing SIEM and XDR systems. We integrate with vulnerability scanners, with client protection software, with intrusion detection software. So again, everything we can do for our customers to make their SOC more productive is what we're trying to focus on. And it's another thing that sets InfoBlox apart, right? Other DDI vendors claim they do rudimentary types of DNS security, but they don't do all these things that we do. And that means that's left to the customers to do. And it's very time consuming and demands expertise that these customers often don't have.
Exactly, very interesting. And I mean, you are right that, when you said that SOC, the analysts in SOC who are actually studying those thousands and millions and billions of logs are doing a very thankless job, and it's a very strenuous job. And anything that comes to their rescue is more than welcome. So coming on to a last couple of points, Jesper, is, InfoBlox last year updated its network identity operating system to provide support for advanced security, additional cloud integrations, and DevOps automation. And in the month of June 2021, we saw the launch of InfoBlox 3.0 that's actually helpful in driving on-prem, virtual, cloud, and hybrid deployments, which are tailored to customers' network modernization needs. So two parts of the question. I just described what happened, but two parts to the question is that what led to this innovation? I mean, what were the typical user challenges that you found were being addressed by this innovation? The second part is that how is the industry seeing this as a favorite tool?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, InfoBlox is an organization that's led in from an innovation perspective from our customers, right? When you have the kind of household customers we have, 72 of the Fortune 100 companies last time I checked, like a huge portion of some of the leading and most innovative and most driven industry leaders on a global scale are InfoBlox customers today. Then you have a huge source of great use cases. And all you need to do is tap into that customer base, spend time with them, and look at how their business is evolving. And you have more than enough demand if you do that well. And I think we do that very, very well at InfoBlox via customer advisory boards, at technical advisory boards, and so on. Specifically, some of the features you talked about that we've led. Like, look, a number of things you mentioned related to cloud and embracing the cloud. All of our big customers are moving to the cloud. And so extending the InfoBlox solution into the cloud is just a natural. That's a lot of the new features we are developing. So for example, if you have an InfoBlox grid, as we call it, and you've extended your corporate network into, let's say, Amazon Azure, or into AWS or Microsoft Azure, or Amazon AWS, you need to make sure that you can extend your InfoBlox grid into those. And when you put a virtual appliance, a InfoBlox grid member, as we call it, into AWS, you need to make sure that that DNS server can interface with Route 53, which is Amazon's DNS server. That's a demand from our customers. And so that's why these kind of features are coming out with our various releases. The second thing you mentioned was DevOps and automation. Look, that's where the world is going today. It's a very exciting world, and it's been brewing for quite a while now. A few years back, the leading automation platforms were solutions like Chef and Puppet. Now maybe it's solutions like Ansible and others. And I think that continues to evolve. There's an incredible amount of investment and exciting capabilities coming out in this whole area called low code, no code, which I think is very promising and very exciting. When you're a vendor like InfoBlox, you have to build your solutions with an API first mindset. Everything our solutions can do, they can do from a UI, but they can also do them from an API. And that is what makes it easy for us to integrate with these leading automation platforms, right? More and more of our customers use Ansible to access our systems. Fewer and fewer of our customers use our usability, even though that's actually always been a strength of InfoBlox. And so that's what that means, that embracing of the automation DevOps type of model. And I think talking about security like we did, given your line of work and your readers' kind of focus, it's no longer DevOps, right? It's DevSecOps. And actually in our world, it's DevNetSecOps, right? All coming together.
Great. So, I mean, that practically brings me to the end of conversation, but I always, whenever I talk to some visionaries like yourself, I always ask them to leave us with a thought as to what do you foresee, when you see the whole landscape from your eyes, from a CEO's perspective, what do you foresee in the next few years, as the challenge, as the opportunity for the CISOs and the CTOs of organizations, and how do you think InfoBlox is going to align with the customers on those opportunities?
Yeah, look, I'm a product person, right? A technology person, and I'm sure that comes through as my excitement for technology. And so it's natural for me to fall into the trap of talking a lot about product and product things. But and we have talked about that, right? I think we have some great solutions that can really help a CISO make his or her team more productive and more effective. And that's the challenge for every CISO today, and make their existing tools better. But the last comment I would focus on is I'm actually really excited about the growth opportunities. And I think the growth opportunities, not just for InfoBlox, but in IT in general, are very exciting. And that's part of why I'm here in India as well, right? India for us is not just a great development center of excellence, it's also a great opportunity to sell into. Tomorrow, I will be in Mumbai hosting some customer roundtables and meeting with some customers one-on-one. India is a big opportunity for InfoBlox, and I'd be amiss if I didn't comment a little bit on that. Being here in India, I think the market here is ready to boom. You are one of the highest growth economies in the sort of sizable world, if we look at it that way. And I know the war kind of wreaks havoc about all GDP estimates for all countries around the world. But InfoBlox is very much investing in India, not just, as I said, as a center of excellence, but as a target market to sell our solutions to. I think with our Blox One platform, we have a much more flexible and frankly cheaper deployment model as well for maybe not the largest enterprises in the world, but what we think of as commercial. And so that's part of why I'm here. And that's part of what I'm very excited about. The CISOs that work for maybe not the largest companies in the world, that have many of the same challenges as the largest company CISOs, they just don't have quite the same budget to get to it. And so they need companies like InfoBlox that can provide a key and core essential network service, but also create a lot of value for CISOs on the securing of the enterprise. And I'm excited about my day today and my day tomorrow in Mumbai with some of those customers. And I appreciate you having me on the show here.
No, excellent. It was a pleasure talking to you, Jesper, and great that we could catch up, even though it was virtually. But thanks for your time and effort to answer my questions. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.